Hello and welcome to the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast. I am your host, Matthew Pejkovic, and this is episode number 664. Releasing March 13 in theaters across the US and video on demand is Mexicali, an action thriller that stars Bren Foster as Joe, an Australian mercenary whose pursuit of the quiet life on an avocado farm in Mexico is interrupted by a cartel seeking revenge. And joining me now to talk about all things Mexicali is the film's director, Mr. Luke LaFontinae. Luke, how are you today?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you so much for being here. I mean, this is just so terrific because your work in action choreography, swordsmithing even has had an impact on action films for such a long time. And now here you are doing your first kind of feature film directing. What's really cool about it is that Jesse V. Johnson wrote the script for Mexicali. I love Jesse. Jesse's like been always been one of my favorite kind of like action writer directors. I had a chance to interview him a couple of months ago as well, which was a really cool experience. When did you first hear about Mexicali from Jesse? Was that something you always knew was like kind of like on the boiler, or did he kind of approach you with this and said,
Well,
"Hey, I got something for you"?
it Mexicali started out as a script called The Farmer,
Yeah.
and Jesse had been doing some research on the cartels in Mexico, and he found a couple of true stories that were very, very interesting about the cartels pushing in on avocado growers in Mexico. And it was an actual true story that the cartel tried to push on a specific avocado farmer, and he pushed back and banded some people together, and actually at one point wound up pushing cartels out and saving his farm. And the military, came to his aid, and he wound up saving his own avocado farm from the cartels because it wound up being an actual thing in Mexico. Avocado plantations were being taken over by the cartels because they realized how profitable they were and that
Hmm.
they were a large enough industry, and they wanted a piece of them. And they just started walking into farms. And Jesse found this true story about one farmer in Mexico who had pushed back, and he started writing from there, and he wrote a script titled Farmer, and that script had Jesse's flair and changes, and he wrote it into an action script, and he wrote the action script, and fairly quickly decided that it would be a good project for Scott Adkins. And probably, I want to say about 2 years ago, um, it was looked at as a possibility. Scott, and I believe Scott was prepped to do another film, wasn't available, and the script sat for a while, and it was a very good script. I liked it. It was different. It was a good action piece, and Jesse brought it back around and said, "Look, I'm considering and thinking about producing a number of action films. As a producer, I want to produce these films, and I'm really thinking, that you should direct one." And I was like, "Really?" And I said, "I'd love to. I'd love to." I didn't overly have, sort of frothing at the mouth ambitions to direct. I liked being a second unit director. I liked choreographing. I liked being a stunt coordinator. Um, I'd always been, you know, very uh, attentive to watching and paying attention to directors' careers and understanding, a lot of my favorite directors and artists. But I found myself not really like chomping at the bit to direct, and until Jesse brought it up, and then I was like, you know what? Yeah, I want to do this very much so. I have a lot to say, and I think that my experience and my opinions and my vision is enough to absolutely warrant directing film. And Jesse went to Ehud Bleiberg and said, "Look, Luke has done a lot of action coordinating for you and a lot of second unit directing, and you've always been happy with his work. What about giving him a shot at directing a film? And Ehud, in all of his generosity, said yes, and greenlit me directing what was at that point The Farmer, which was soon to turn into Mexicali. And our cast came together very quickly, and I got blessed and immensely lucky to get the cast that I got. And I got no shortage of crap for it when the cast came together, and Jesse kind of went, "Do you have any idea how lucky you are to have this cast for your first movie right out of the gate?" And I was like, yes, I absolutely understand how lucky I am, and I'm really appreciative of it. So it snowballed because when we took it as a commodity to market, there was immediate interest, lots of immediate interest, and Ehud just turned around and said, "Let's make it right now." And so the whole thing fast tracked, and this is the result.
Your lead in the film, Bren Foster, fellow Aussie, love Bren. He has been around for a while, ever since he did his Fight Science shows back in 2009, 2010. He's always been kind of like on the precipice. It wasn't really, I think anyway, until a couple of years ago when he directed Life After Fighting that people really realized the potential he has as an action leading man. How soon did Bren come onto the radar for you? Did you know of Bren's work beforehand? Was this the first time you met him?
No, I'd known Bren for years. Bren was introduced to me by Ron Balicki, who's also a very, very well-known martial arts instructor and kind of a famous figure in the martial arts world. He's a full instructor in Jeet Kune Do and Silat and Muay Thai and a number of other things. Very, very prominent. His school is Mars, and he's married to Diana Anasto, who's also sort of martial arts royalty. And he introduced me to Bren. They were working on a project, and I came in literally just to be a body, to stunt and do rehearsals, and wound up getting along with Bren immediately. I loved him. Thought he was a great guy and amazing talent. I watched him bounce off the walls and throw 720s and just physically possible things. And we were kind of mini fans of each other. We liked each other as friends. And this came up, and they said, "We're thinking about Bren Foster." I said, "I love it. I absolutely. I'm in 1,000%. I'm all about Bren." And Bren found out that I was going to direct and that Jesse was going to produce, and that Jesse had written the script, and Bren liked what he saw and came on board, and I was really lucky because I really knew Bren's potential and Bren's talent, and I understood that Bren had purposely held back for a couple of years in terms of Bren had been offered a lot of movies, and he was very smart, very picky about what movies he took and what he didn't. And it wound up being an attribute for him because he's massively talented, but he didn't put himself in the wrong movies. And so because of that, he has options now. And after Life After Fighting, the world got to know, hey, this is Bren Foster, and you need to know who he is. And then after working with him purely as an actor, Bren just impressed the ever-living hell out of me. He is an absolute thespian. He is a Shakespearean quality actor. He is just a phenomenal top-level actor, capable of doing, any dramatic scene of any sort. He is not by any means, part of the martial arts action movie, action star fare, where if we look at, the last 30, 40, 50 years, we've had a lot of people who were charismatic and could great action, but weren't exactly, they weren't heavy hitting actors. You could give them a handful of dialogue and they'd say it kind of wooden, and then they would proceed to do great action scenes. Bren is not in that category. I really think that this is Bren's time now. I think he's going to kind of explode onto the scene now because people know of him, but they'll really find out the level of actor he is moving forward from this point on.
Bren, when people watch this film, and if they haven't seen Bren before, the first thing they're going to realize is this combination of speed and power that he has to his martial arts, which was always kind of like a highlight of his kind of like his training and everything else. But he's also multi-skilled. I mean, the succession of fight scenes at the start of Mexicali are really impressive because he's going up against different opponents in a row, showcasing different skills. Will go from like Taekwondo to Jiu-Jitsu to all other kind of stuff. When you have a multifaceted martial artist like that, how does your brain kind of work when it comes to fight choreography? Are you thinking, oh, he could do a little bit of this, he could a little bit do that? I mean, does working with a multi a martial artist kind of like Bren Foster, does that make things easier for you as a fight choreographer, or is the choice so plumb and so varied, does it make it harder for you to try to capture everything in that one setting? The Matt's Movie Reviews YouTube channel is brought to you by TeePublic. TeePublic is the world's largest marketplace for independent creators to sell their work on the highest quality merchandise. With over 1.2 million designs, TeePublic is sure to have something you love.
It's absolutely a challenge, but it's a pleasant challenge. It's a challenge that I absolutely 200% just dove right at. Bren is insanely talented. He's and Bren knows this, and people know this about me. I don't blow smoke up people's ass. I don't sugarcoat things. Bren can do anything. I had known Bren's Taekwondo. I'd known Bren's boxing. I'd known Bren's fighting. I know that Bren was multifaceted in terms of training and weapons and other things, but I did not know that what for me seemed like a short period of time, Bren became an absolute monster in jiu-jitsu. And I had never seen Bren do jiu-jitsu. And so all of a sudden, I had been, working diligently to choreograph all of the fights, knowing that I was going to accept Bren's blessing and have Bren change whatever he wanted because he's the action star. And if he had changed all the choreography, I would have been fine with it. But he was very gracious in terms of liking a lot of what I put together. And he changed a number of things that made more sense and that suited him and suited his character better. But then, we quickly realized I had a fantastic stunt performer who wound up being my assistant coordinator named Gavin Taragawa. And Gavin was also a full-on instructor in jiu-jitsu and is just a beast in his own right. You don't want to tangle with Gavin. But in working together, Bren and myself, and especially Bren, realized, hey, we've got to do something different. We got to do something that's like pure jiu-jitsu with Gavin. And I said, absolutely. I said, let's vary up the fights because I had tried. I said, okay, we're going to have somebody who's more of a kickboxer. We're going to have another guy who's a straight boxer. We're going to have another guy who's a little bit more of like into flash. And so Bren's character would be dealing with a multitude of different styles. And then it fit perfectly to put the very severe 100% jiu-jitsu fight into the film. And Bren being, such a just tornado of martial arts skill in terms of the guy lives and has an essence of appreciation for the spiritual side of martial arts. He just learns everything to perfection. And so when he and Gavin started working on the grappling fight, it came together very fast. They just jumped on the mat and mauled each other. And all of a sudden, in this tangle of bodies, they'd suddenly come up and go, yeah, that's really good. And then we can do this finish. And then you can transfer to this. And then you can transition into that. And we're going to Kimura here. And, I I studied judo. I studied jujitsu, but not Brazilian jiu-jitsu. I was of an older school in terms of more like Japanese jiu-jitsu and aikijitsu. Um, so I knew a fair amount of what they were doing, but I realized they have this under control, and I immediately went to how am I going to shoot this? And I started running around them in circles, like a gerbil in in a hamster wheel, figuring out how to cover this with camera because what they were doing was so high level. I didn't want to cut out of it. I did not want a lot of edits in that fight. So I started figuring out how, as they moved, to capture them in 180s and push-ins and pullbacks and keep the camera moving so that I could capture much longer sequences of the complex transitions that they were doing. So anybody that was a diehard martial arts fan who knew jujitsu would appreciate the level of complexity that we were showing, and we weren't spoon feeding the audience and chopping it all up and going, yeah, it's two guys on the ground fighting. Um, I was very, very happy with how the fight turned out and how we covered it. And, Brendan and Gavin were just amazing in the fight. Having two high level guys like that who are both bringing it jiu-jitsu and both massively physical, it just exploded into this fight that, I think they had choreographed the entire fight in like an hour and a half, and then just started rehearsing it and looking at transitions. And then I just started standing over him and saying, Bren, I'm going to put camera here. I'm going to be wide. As Gavin comes out of your lock, I'm going to pivot 180 and then swing back. And when you go to your next technique, I'm just going to follow you guys. And it just, it was a symbiosis. It was so easy. And so having somebody like Bren, having top level people in one way makes things much easier because the creativity just explodes. And the martial arts aspect, because you're surrounded by minded people, my whole stunt team, the stunt guys were all good at whatever they were good at, but they were all, full on martial artists and totally committed. So it just flowed like water. It was laborious. And I mean, it was hours and hours and hours. It was days of, 6 hour solid days with no lunch or anything, just plowing through these fights. But the end result was what you see on screen in terms of we were able to film all those fights back to back at the same time. We shot that whole opening fight sequence in one day. It took the entire day, but because everybody had trained it so rigorously and because Bren was in such top level shape, we just went next fight, next fight, next fight, next fight. And normally on any action movie, that would have been broken up into, 2 to 5 days. And because I had Bren, and because Bren is so explosive and so his fitness level, and I have to say this realistically, I don't want people to get the wrong level. His fitness level is almost that of a superhero. I've seen Bren do things that I haven't seen any other martial artist do. And I've been studying martial arts for 40 years. I started studying Aikijitsu when I was 8 years old. And so I can fully appreciate Bren's talent and was so lucky that I got to put it 2,000% to use in the movie.
Another great thing that's in the movie, and something that you're known for as well, on top of your fight choreography, is choreography in sword fights. Because you yourself are a swordsmith, you're a historian when it comes to that aspect of things. You've been on lots of channels, lots of podcasts talking about this stuff. And there's some really great machete fights in this movie. When you approach that aspect of choreography, what are some things do you see in how other films deal with sword fighting that kind of irks you? And what is it that you want to bring to your sword fights that's different to everything else? Because for me, just as an observer, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, when I watch your sword fights and hear how you approach it, there's lots of substance that goes with the style, where other sword fights in other movies, a little bit too much marching band, twiddling sticks kind of stuff, and not enough kind of like of the substance there as well. That's what I kind of take from your sword fight choreography.
Well, I really appreciate that because that's pretty spot on, and I do push very hard for my sword fights. One, to tell a story. There's got to be a story between the two adversaries. Who's the better swordsman? Who's studied harder? Who knows techniques that the other one doesn't know? And how is our whoever our champion is, how is he going to wind up winning if he winds up getting on the short end? And with everything that I do, I want to showcase real technique, and I want to show complexities because there's a misnomer that's been going around in the industry for 50 years of, well, you can't show sword fights that way, it's too complicated, they'll never understand what's going on.
Hmm.
And I 100% disagreed. I said, you're absolutely wrong. The reason you're wrong is that you don't know swordsmanship. You know nothing about sword fighting. So we get producers and directors and people who go, no, 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 just dumb it down and make it, click clacks and X cuts, and we'll just speed it up. And, there was a real problem with a stigma in sword fights of, one, either everybody involved wasn't really an expert at swordsmanship. So you'd get physically talented people, and maybe one guy in the whole thing knew how to sword fight, but that's when you got very generic choreography, bad camera angles. They shoot everything too close up because if there's anything, the same way you used to watch all the old musicals with Gene Kelly and Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, look what they did. They pulled the camera back to show people's physical talent. And it's even more important in sword fights because when two people are dancing together, they're close to each other. When they're in a sword fight, you have to compensate 4 feet for the two swords crossing over.
Hmm.
So here are two bodies, but they can't be this close because they've got swords in between them. And each one of those swords is 3 to 4 feet long. So you're going to have a big space in between the actors as they cross swords, and you have to capture that whole thing. And it's very hard to stay in a profile wide, so you'll have to come around over the shoulders. But really, that's the importance in terms of, if you're going to tell a story, you've got to show people what they're doing. When it came to Mexicali, I had briefly mentioned something, and Bren caught on to it immediately, and Bren said, yeah, we got to do a machete fight in this. And I was like, oh, hell yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the great thing was, Bren mentioned Brian Sloyer, who's a phenomenal stuntman and weapons expert, Filipino martial arts and bladed weapons. He is phenomenal talent, full-on instructor. He choreographs all the time. And I normally am very I'm choreographing and this is my thing, but the two of them were so talented that I was perfectly fine with stepping back and going, you guys know what you're doing. You actually don't need my help. And I allowed them to flow and to choreograph. And, there were 1 or 2 moments when I was just about to step in and go, ah, and then they changed the choreography to what I would have done anyway.
Hmm.
So we were so of a like mind that those machete fights came together very fast. And I was really proud of them. And then all I had to do was be responsible for shooting them correctly. And because they were doing such high-level stuff, and because Bren can go 1,000,000 miles an hour, and so could Brian, I wasn't going to tell them to slow down. I just pulled camera back. And I made sure I had them framed perfectly and just let them go. And so it was kind of a nice change and a happy medium that I didn't need to choreograph. And I had 2 people who were experts, who knew what they were doing. And as they went, I go, it's just getting better and better. I can be lazy right now. I'm just going to sit back and watch them. And it's like I said, we were all of a like mind. So the only thing for me was, let's keep a sense of danger and realism. And they absolutely did that. It was a great experience for me because it was new in that I didn't have to be all over it. I didn't have to step in. I didn't have to get in there. I didn't have to do anything. I just stood back and went, brilliant, guys. Let's shoot it. And I'm happy because they did what I would have done anyway, plus came up with, a couple of exchanges and some end results that even I was like, I'm going to be honest right now. I don't know the technique. It's badass, and I'm so happy you stuck it in there. I love it. So it was great. It was a fantastic experience, and new for me to not have to jump in the middle and grumble and go through 90 different variations of choreography. It was very pleasant. I loved it. It was a great experience.
The Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is brought to you by Amazon Prime Video. One of the best on-demand streaming services available, Amazon Prime Video features exclusive Amazon originals as well as popular movies and TV shows. Watch Amazon Prime Video anytime, anywhere. I have my a little bit of a saying that I have through my podcast, which is make swords great again. And the reason why I say this is because when I grew up, so I was born in 81, so a lot of the stuff that I grew up with, a lot of the pop culture, whether it be cartoons, comic books, movies, sword fighting, heroes with swords was a big thing. I don't think you'll be hard pressed not to find a kid from back in the 80s walking around maybe with his own plastic sword or sword made out of cardboard or anything like that. This year is really interesting because I have a feeling that swords are going to be great again. We have a new Highlander movie coming out, and of course, swordplay is really big in that. Masters of the Universe, new movie there coming out. Of course, the He-Man sword is such a big, pivotal pop culture thing for a lot of kids from the 80s too. With these things coming back, can you envision swords becoming great again in the pop culture sphere? Because for a long time, it was gunplay. It was kind of like, all sorts of fantastical stuff that kind of like the superhero movies brought in. But I have a feeling that swords will become a thing again to the point where my own kids, I always have them watching my older films. Like I get them watching like stuff from the 80s and such. That's suited to them and their age, of course. But they pick up on stuff. So
Right.
now they're going around doing sword fighting and making axes out of cardboard and all sorts of stuff like that, which is I think it's just great because that's what I did when I was a kid. Can you envision in the mainstream movie pop culture sphere swords becoming great again? Because I could see it definitely happening.
Absolutely, I can. I have very high hopes for the new Highlander film. I know all the guys involved. I've known Chad Stahelski for years, and Chad has, deservedly blown up, as an action director and a producer. And Chad loves the Highlander films. He loves the original Highlander film, and I petitioned years ago when Chad first got the job. Years ago, I petitioned really hard to let me be the sword master, not do the choreography or anything else, not be the stunt coordinator, not be the fight choreographer, because they have their own style. And the last thing I wanted to do was step on their toes. But I really wanted to be the sword master on the film. I said, look, just let me give all the history, the correct weapons, the use of the weapons, so that all the historical points can be really on and 100% accurate. And any little technique tidbits that you find fun, I can give you. But then you guys can just go ahead and choreograph to your heart's content because it's your movie. I just really wanted to be the sword master. And unfortunately, that didn't come to pass. The guys knew me, but I also know that, they have a very regimented way of doing things. And it works for them because look at all the success they've had. And so my point is I really do think there's a chance for swords to make a big comeback because I believe in those guys, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed that Highlander's fantastic and it's chocked full of great sword fights and amazing action. And, I do have a couple of behind the scenes ideas and tidbits that Chad told me that are going to make for a more exciting Highlander film. And I think everybody will be surprised by that. But also with Masters of the Universe coming out and the new trailer looking great and looking a lot more traditional and respecting, the
Yeah.
original He-Man look and stories and such. I'm really keeping my fingers crossed that it's I'm rooting for it 10,000%, and I'm hoping it's great. Because you've also got a larger HEMA community now, which is doing historical European martial arts, and there are a lot more people studying swordsmanship all over the world now. Oddly enough, at the end of this month, I'm going to go to an event called SoCal Sword Fight, which is
Hmm.
going to be held in Southern California, which is now the largest sword gathering in the world. They have, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people showing up from all over the world. And it's fantastic to see. I went last year, and everybody involved is fantastic, gracious, kind, respectful. And it's really about sharing all kinds of sword knowledge. And so, with all of that growing, I do see that there's a real chance for swords to become great again, because all it really takes is imaginative writing now.
Hmm.
Um, our generation of actors today are fairly committed to training hard, and with things like the John Wick series and things where the actors aren't even given a choice. It's like, no, you're not going to have a stunt double. I'm going to make you do 90% of this. Um, it sells the validity of what you're watching. So people will get more into a sword fight if they're seeing that the actor's doing 90% of his own work. And I think that going back to classic fare and classic stories, we haven't had, unfortunately, in my opinion, we haven't had a really good Three Musketeers film in a long time,
Right.
because I'm really a fan of the old 70s Richard Lester versions,
Oh,
which was
yes.
originally one film. But
Yeah.
those are my movies. And oddly enough, um, a very strange tidbit that very few people know was that I was almost cast in the 90s Disney version,
Okay.
because an instructor that I had worked with the executive producers on that movie, and he got me in to do a screen test and a reading. And at one point, I was unofficially cast as Aramis
Mm.
before Charlie Sheen got the part. And it was going to be a dream come true for me. The fact that I had been cast as Aramis. Ethan Hawke was going to play D'Artagnan at that point. And all of a sudden, everything went up in a whirlwind like a tornado and changed, because the film had to be fast tracked, because Sony was doing their own version of the Three Musketeers, directed by Jeremiah Chechik, who directed Benny and June. And those two films were going to go head to head. So Disney shot their film into fast forward, had Joe Roth take over, and Joe Roth whirlwind slapped the whole movie together very quickly. And I got hauled into a meeting and had to be told across a big table, Charlie Sheen is now playing your part. And
Oh, no.
inside, I cursed and cussed and jumped up and down and go, that guy, I can sword fight circles around that guy. What the hell? But it's Hollywood, and
Yeah.
that kind of stuff happens. But I think that stories like the Three Musketeers, all of the old classic Greek fables, the classic Jason and the Argonauts film, I think there's tons of those, and I'm even keeping my fingers crossed for the Odyssey,
Hmm.
and I'm hoping that that's a great film, because I really do. I see a chance for that kind of storytelling to come back, which classically involves men fighting with swords. So yeah, I'm keeping my fingers crossed wholeheartedly that makes a big comeback.
Final question here. As you said before, you've had a history of doing second unit directing. You've done shorts. I saw Apartment 29, the short that you did years ago. I saw that on YouTube. You did RS Rising. You did some work on that as a director writer as well. But here you have feature film directorial debut. Now you had a taste of it. Now you were a part of it. Is there going to be more Luke LaFontaine director in the to come? Are you seeking more opportunities like this?
I am now. I am wholeheartedly. I think that I have a lot of stories to tell. I have a number of, I have two or three sort of sword type adventure films that I'm working on. Um, there have also been, conversations about a Scott Adkins, Bren Foster team up, which I am 2000%
Yes.
on top of.
Yeah.
I know both of them very well. I love both of them to death, but I know their ins and outs. I know Scott really well. Scott and I have like bandied and worked and yelled at each other on set, done everything so that we know each other. So the idea of, a team up with those two, I feel very, very confident that I could do a great job directing a film with them in it because I know them. And my idea is that it's an absolute over the top spectacle. We get Brandon Scott fighting 100 guys. If this is going to be the one and only team up, if this is going to be the hurrah, it's got to be 2000% over the top. It's got to be so chock full of action that every other action film that's ever been done looks boring by comparison. And what makes that possible is the fact that Scott Adkins and Bren are just physical geniuses. They're literally one step under superhero in terms of what they're capable of, and they make doing action movies so much easier, so that you can focus on more content. Scott. When I worked with Scott, Scott would constantly come, look at what I was doing, go, great, I love it, make it 2 minutes longer. And I'd be standing there with my mouth agape going, what do you mean? That means it's going to be like a 6.5 minute fight. But great. I'm all for it. And so I really, I really realize now that I think I can be, a great action director for audiences that want a certain type of action. I know the type of action that I feel is needed. I personally feel that, in some ways, action needs to go in new directions. And, I'm old school, so I want to get away from the AI and I want to get back to real people doing real things, because that's what makes the audience gasp. That's what makes the audience excited, is that they're seeing two incredibly physically talented people doing their own stunts, doing it for real. It's not AI, it's not CGI, it's real action done by real people.
So for everyone out there, March 13 in theaters and video on demand, Mexicali. I recommend everyone out there, if it's showing at a theater near you, go to the cinema, watch it on the big screen. These fight scenes deserve to be seen in the biggest screen as possible. As soon as you watch the first 10 minutes of this film, you'll see why. Mexicali, I really recommend people check this out when it comes out. Luke LaFontaine, I thank you so very much for your time today. Congratulations to you, sir, on your first feature film directorial effort. And hopefully we talk again in the future. It's been a pleasure to talk to you today.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much, Matt. I've had a great time. And yeah, I'd love to do it again.
Thank you for watching the Matt's Movie Reviews channel. Please subscribe for more reviews, podcast interviews, and exclusive content.